Okay, well, thanks a lot for hanging in there once again on what has to be, I think it's the only day that the sun has appeared in Seattle in about 45 days. And, you know, and they said Lent was hard. Okay, so I do want to thank you all for being here. One of the things that I bring from Lotus, certainly, and if not from IBM, is a real conviction that when they came and said, you know, work in the server group, you know, and sort of, you know, what's the market for servers? Well, actually, nobody buys servers, in my opinion. You know, servers are a necessary thing to do something else. And I look around Microsoft, and we do provide some of the value-added things. We provide some tools, we provide some databases and stuff like that. But the vast majority of the value that's added to our servers is added by people outside of Redmond, by orders of magnitude. And you represent the group of people that add value to it. So my talking to you, first of all, I'm very pleased to be here talking to you, but I want you to know that in my team at the very least, and I know across Microsoft, there's a real conviction that for the server business, we are absolutely 100% dependent on people adding value to our product in order to make it usable. Servers aren't much used for anything else. In fact, you can't even use them as boat anchors because they suffer from intermittent floating. So, actually, how do I move this thing? Okay, so let's get going. What I want to do is just recap a little bit. How has the last few days of the airlift been, by the way? Generally good? Yeah, yes, it's been great, Cliff. Okay, no, I mean I do want to make sure I get some feedback. This session was going to be an hour. We cut it back to a half an hour to make sure that you all got out on time. We still get to Chris, so I'm going to be around. I would welcome any feedback from you it's anything you've gathered during the week. We'll have some time for questions at the end, but anything you want to grab me personally and say, I wish you'd change this, or I'm really happy about that. Why don't you do more about this, or what are you going to do about this? I really would be glad to get you. But I'll try and do a little recap of the sort of the key points of the week. I want to talk a little bit about what the server vision was that Bill talked to you about, and some of the key elements, key underpinnings and assumptions about the product. I want to talk a little bit about the way we talk about it to customers when we actually get to see them, and then talk about the things that you can do going forward. So the server vision, this is actually, most of these words up here, it probably appears a little cumbersome to you. And the reason is I came up with most of these, and I've only been here about 60 days. So, you know, I hadn't quite got my Microsoft succinct marketing phrase hat on, you know, trustworthy computing and stuff like that. So, you know, and information at your fingertips. So this is a little bit more of an IBM and Lotus description of a vision. But what we really wanted to point out was that the underlying assumption of the operating system is that we believe we've got technology that has both breadth and depth and can span across geographies, between devices of different sizes, and can handle application loads that scale horizontally by adding devices and scale vertically through symmetric multiprocessing. Historically, we've been present in the scale-out world, and we're beginning to make inroads into the scale-up world, simply to provide that complete, rounded set of technologies. The second point is federated. We believe in the long run there'll be that the world of computing will generally be dependent on, not necessarily entirely consisting of, but loosely connected computing nodes. And that's hardware nodes and software nodes. And I spent enough time in the application development world to recognize that a dynamically bound, loosely bound, distributed application model, as well as a system model where resources were located dynamically, where changes could be made in isolation, where the benefits of existing development could be taken advantage of and moved somewhere else, was absolutely nirvana for software. And is, in fact, that's been the dream of software engineers for a long time, and I believe we're at very, very close to the cusp of that as we see the convergence of huge scale-out systems, large scale-up systems, and the deployment of web services. And it's our intention to provide absolutely the deepest and the best technology that spans all the way across devices, a complete range of servers and allows things to be distributed both geographically and organizationally, and information to be dynamically located and linked seamlessly. So, a few years ago, actually, I'll tell you a sort of story. A couple of you may have heard this, but this is a true story. When I first came here, I was talking to an old friend of mine who was at a consulting company, and he was doing some consulting for IBM, and he happened to run into some old friends, mutual friends, at Armonk, and he said, "Did you hear Cliff Reeves went to Microsoft?" And the guy said, "No, I didn't. What's he working on?" He said, "Oh, he's working on the Windows Server." And he said, "Oh, Windows servers, isn't that a contradiction in terms?" And so the point is, I think a couple of years ago, maybe as recently as a year or so ago, people just didn't think of Windows as a server-based operating system. And I think that the technology we've delivered and many of the customer solutions is well now ahead of the reputation, but the reputation's beginning to turn. And I'm going to take a great deal of pleasure in going back and kicking that guy's ass. Okay, but so let's take a couple of cases. I said, Windows was where it used to be very much a departmental system, file and print, the business that we sort of moved into Novell's space there, and then grew up on the premise of applications, but generally actually wasn't seen as a robust, serious, you bet your business OS. And with the advent of Windows 2000, which took a quantum leap forward in terms of robustness, depth of integration, power of function, and actually a complete range of service that it offered, it's now been enabled a huge range of applications. I'll just take a couple of examples. Verizon was running on old mainframe systems for their customer support billing environment, and they found that change was unbelievably difficult to make, that the system's hardware alone was costing them a fortune, and they moved to Windows. Very rapid time to market. They saved themselves around $10 million a year purely in hardware costs, not counting anything to do with the flexibility they gained and the applications they're based. And they're running complete bet your business. They've got 9 terabytes of data and around 7,500 concurrent customer support reps on the system at any one time. So it's a significantly scalable system, and they're betting their business on. Another one I'm kind of fond of is Tony Blair's government, when they came in, took a mandate to put all government services available, to make them available online by 2005. And the approach they decided to take was, rather than re-engineering all of the applications they had, I think it was over 800 departments and several thousands of applications that would be available to the public. And rather than kind of re-engineer them, what they decided to do was to produce a gateway that would provide open but also secure, controlled access to all those systems. And we took on the job, and to do it on Windows, it's going to be, in the long run, a big .NET deployment. And we took over from an existing vendor who spent about 8 months and hadn't made any progress. And the key point here is we're running now large portions of the Social Security system in the UK, or at least the consumer access to it. And we delivered a complete system for a large number of the department accesses within 4 months. And after the previous vendor had actually been sort of essentially dragging their heels for 8 months. So not only the systems managing bet your business applications, but we're also able to deliver them with a good deal of agility. You've probably seen us in the press or been working with us yourselves on benchmarking. And the point of benchmarking is not so much that people operate the large part of their systems at loads like this. The point is, once you demonstrate that you can run bet your business applications reliably, scalably, you can get them and deploy them, it's really important to show headroom, because everybody expects to grow, and nobody wants to be, for their system's performance, to be knocking on the ceiling of a performance, or knocking on the top of a performance curve. So benchmarks are primarily there to demonstrate the extreme capability of the system, so that you can, with confidence, deploy the system and know that as your needs grow, you won't come anywhere near capacity. And we've done incredibly well there. And these are both scale-up and scale-out benchmarks. Historically, we've done well on scale-out benchmarks simply because we've brought PC economics to that space. And what used to be previously fairly expensive risk-based boxes, proprietary hardware-software combinations, we're able to take advantage in the huge price curves that Intel standard-based systems have gone through. And that's an example of the top one. The top TPCC benchmark, we hold that. We have the highest benchmark by far on any platform, above Sun, above IBM, above Hitachi, NEC, Fujitsu, and all of the other players at that high end. And just to give some idea of load, that system carries many hundreds of, that transaction rate is many hundreds, probably thousands of times the daily traffic on eBay. So it's a huge system load. The point here is, though, is not that this represents a realistic load for a company that we can think of or that we're likely to be working with soon, but that in the long run, that kind of loading may well represent the aggregate loading across a widely diverse multi-company, multi-country system. And it's important that a network, that the network and the system be able to scale to those kinds of transaction loads. And we're pretty much the best now. The second thing we've done, the artificial, the so-called synthetic benchmarks, which a group of companies get together to define and that they both agree is standard and representative, and of course has the problem, as well as being general and agreed to, it's not realistic. It doesn't actually represent any specific workload. So more recently, we've been pursuing pure application workload, which is with the large ISVs like SAP, like PeopleSoft, and like Siebel, and actually benchmarking on standardized workloads, but on real-life applications that they deliver. And we're number one on all of these, on any we beat or best on any platform, and the only with one exception, which is the SAP R3 benchmark. And we're at 24,000 concurrent users, and we are third, and the leader has 25,000, and we are going after that benchmark. The goal is to show that we can both scale out and scale up, and that the systems really have absolutely no headroom. But it's not all about big systems. So as we take a look at the Windows 2000 line, and you saw this probably several times during the last couple of days, and probably also during Bill Vecti's introduction presentation, we're making sure we have a complete and comprehensive product line, and we'll continue to refine this as we see needs in the marketplace. At the high end, that's the big one. Currently, it's anything above 8-way and above can run data center, and data center supports up to 64-way multiprocessing. The only 64-way machine right now in existence is through Unisys, but we're starting to see the other vendors deliver machines above 8 ways. We can expect to see 8 ways, 12 ways, 16 ways appearing from IBM based on their the technology used in Regatta and their RISC systems, and Summit technology systems arriving this summer. So we'll start to see other hardware vendors coming in with very, very high performance multi-way SMP machines. Moving down, the enterprise server supports up to 32 gig of memory. It's the server on which you can get a 64-bit version. And then moving down, standard server, which we'll increasingly start seeing, we think, as positioned much more often in departments and in small businesses. And then we'll be taking a fairly significant rev of small business server. How many of you actually saw the small business server session this week? We're pretty happy with the ease of use and ease of deployment of the system. And while I don't want to get too much into specifics, we can talk afterwards, we're going to make a very dramatic pricing change in that product. The goal is to take that down into the market of 1 to 10 PC businesses. We think we've done enough on ease of use now that we can comfortably go in. And I'd say 2 releases ago, SBS couldn't make that claim. SBS, of course, it's hard to deploy. It was hard to develop. But I think we've gone through 2 generations now of improvements to the deployment of that product, and it's very, very slick. All of the customization is there under the hood, but the initial deployment is very straightforward. We've also done a great deal of work there, and this is just one example, but we've done a great deal of work there to link it to value-added providers. Our model of small business deployment is that the small businesses probably can't afford a great deal of on-site and not interested in setting up relationships that could pay for on-site assistance. And as a result, value-added partners don't tend to support them. So they get one-off deployments and don't call me, and the machines sit there and sort of gather dust. And they find them a burden. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to introduce a mechanism where we can have much greater VAP access to those systems through Windows Terminal Server and remote support, so VAPs can make money at relatively low cost by doing monitoring, debugging, reconfigurations, and so on from the warmth and comfort of their offices without actually having to incur the time and expense of a sort of a house call. So a lot of work going on that project to push that down into that space. We kept SQL Server in it. There was a great deal of debate in the development and product management organization about whether we should take SQL Server out. And the eventual decision was leave it in. The first decision you have to make has to be based on the existing customer base and the infrastructure, the value-added partners. And if there's one single person using SQL with a business application on SBS, then I don't want to be the person who tells them they've got to go buy a SQL license when they want to go to the new version. So absolutely a sort of commitment to just not rock the boat, even though we think SQL use is relatively light in that space. And then we've introduced a new product, which you probably got, those of you who are interested in that area probably saw sessions on that this week, which is the web server, really geared at the multi-web server front ends, so web farm usage. That is in large enterprises just deploying internet access, so they've got load balanced front ends, and also in the service provider space. And for those of you who've been working in this area, it really replaces the server appliance kit, which has been an OEM only product for the last year or so. It's geared at that, so really they are geared at that very low end, but it is, of course, in its heart, standard server. Goal is, of course, make sure we've got a complete range of servers all the way from the high end and all the way to the absolute lowest end so that we can cover the market and we can show a clear migration path and the ability for people to put servers in exactly the right size and configuration that they need them. .NET, probably one of the things that excites me absolutely the most. And the reason for it is, I look at just, if you think of .NET, it's a set of tools, it's a set of Visual Studio.NET, it's a set of services, pre-built componentry on the web, if you like, things like passport, notification, calendars, and so on. You might learn that you as developers, for those of you who are, don't want to have to rewrite. But the interesting thing about the services is not that you might say, oh boy, there's a calendar there. I'm so relieved I won't have to write one. I can go sort of lease that one from Microsoft. Actually, the model is the important thing, I think, rather more than the services. Passport or at least authentication might be an important standard going forward, but the real thing here is the model by which services can be developed and reused. Whether you use ours or you use your own or you resell your own or you reuse somebody else's, that's the sweet spot. The third element of the .NET platform is, again, the wide range of servers, all which will be fully .NET enabled. They'll carry the .NET runtime, the ASP.NET runtime, and last, a whole new generation of smart clients, all fully XML enabled, so that we can have the ability, and this is my definition of free software, which is software that can be developed by anybody, deployed anywhere, discovered at any time by anybody, and consumed just exactly when it's needed. And this sort of gets back to the heart of the issue. I spent a lot of time in development tools and have a real fondness for sort of development paradigms. And nirvana for the people I worked with was, here's what we'd like: a high-performance, multilingual, object-oriented, fully inherited, distributed, dynamically bound development environment. Want to be able to write a piece of code in any language, place it anywhere on the network, discover it, inherit from it, from language and other code, debug across the boundaries, whether they're network boundaries or language boundaries, and I want to be able to build an application that when it needs a function, discovers where it is, goes and invokes it, whether it's local on the system, across the LAN, or in fact across the network, across the world. And that's what that .NET has delivered. There's a number of people in that organization who've come from development environments for which that was nirvana. There's people out of Digitalk, the Smalltalk community, who've come into that world and delivered the common language runtime. I'm very excited about that, and I think that is probably, if when you take a look at Windows.net and the .NET vision, it's that sort of sweetness. It's the Lego world that we'd all been looking for in software is about to be delivered. So long run, I think that'll be the most profound thing that comes out of Microsoft for quite some time. The good news is, while we're embedding the .NET services directly into Windows.net, the Windows.net server, we're also making all of the technology available on Windows 2000, and you can start with Windows 2000 downloads and Visual Studio.net doing development that will move smoothly to Windows.net. You can start now and move smoothly to Windows.net when it becomes available. I want to spend a couple of minutes, if I may, talking about how we talk to how we work with engineering and how we work with some of our customers. And we tend to think of break the product up into three major audiences. Now, stuff overlaps here, but we tend to think it's okay. We're building a set of things that are built for the IT professional. It's technology and attributes. It's things like scalability, reliability, availability, security. The technology that exists around that pure IT infrastructure that IT professionals value. Second is we want to serve the developer. And the ASP.NET and Visual Studio.NET are geared entirely at that audience. We start looking at, we're doing things in the system and making sure that we make them accessible through managed code, interfaces, and so on. And last, if you take a look at Windows and its initial success as a server, it was as a file server, file sharing and print sharing. And that's still a huge portion of the absolute units that are deployed out there are doing just that. There's got to be a new generation of that. And when you think about what's going on in the sort of the knowledge worker space, it's that increasingly the server's becoming the only thing that a set of people share. When you want to work on projects, you don't necessarily work in the same office building, you don't necessarily work in the same department, not even necessarily in the same company or the same country. And as a result, people form for transient sort of ad hoc work groups, and they need something they need to have something in common where they can store work, share projects. So where we're going with SharePoint and as we start looking at introducing real-time communication natively into the system, it's really geared at that audience. So that sort of gives you a roadmap for how we're tending to think now about the functions of the servers. And if you step back now, you can say, so Windows NT was really geared at knowledge workers, but with a nod to application developers, because it carried the 32-bit APIs, carried the pretty good toolkit. You start to see COM+, MTS, MSMQ kind of rolling out at that space, and a certain amount of IT infrastructure. But probably the area where it was considered most criticized was it's really not great IT infrastructure. It's not as easy to manage. It doesn't scale as well. Doesn't run multiple applications particularly well. So Windows 2000, the searchlight in development, moved and focused on IT infrastructure. And that was really geared at the illities. Scalability, manageability, reliability. Huge numbers of changes in that space. Didn't get everything right. There's still things to do, for example, see Windows.net, the Windows management instrumentation to make systems management much smoother, to enable scripts, the people who come from a Unix background and are used to that kind of script and command line power to manage their systems. So there's still things that are coming in Windows.net. But Windows 2000 was a huge leap forward, primarily addressed at the IT department. Windows.net rounds out a lot of those features. There's a lot of improvements in ease of use. So WMI, automatic deployment of certs. So although it's got the same underlying security infrastructure, the PKI, the Kerberos-based technology, on-disk encryption, stuff like that, they've rounded it out, made it much smoother and easier to deploy. So deploying a wireless network is much more straightforward now with Windows.net. But primarily incremental but profound improvements. But the real change in Windows.net is a major focus on developers. So you can look at this as going back to the roots of Visual Studio and sort of Visual Basic and MFC and real focus on developers. You'll see that developers will probably end up being the #1 theme as we start talking about this product in the press and talking to our customers. The real goal will be get people running on .net. But the next release, I anticipate, Longhorn, will bring back the focus on the knowledge worker. And while we've done a great deal of work in Windows.net to make it an incredibly good server when it's working with Office and the desktop, for example, SharePoint Team Server is there in the product, you can expect to see yet the next rev as we start to bring Yukon in, and that will come in the Longhorn timeframe. So that gives you sort of, in a sense, the sequence of focuses that the development team is going through and delivering the server. And so I don't know if this will help you, but as we've started talking to customers about Windows 2000 and Windows.net and saying, okay, what's the real value here as you start looking at playing with your business? Say, okay, the thing that we feel we've got to deliver is the ability for businesses to be agile, to be able to move fast, be able to move with confidence to the platform. So you think about agility as sort of two things. Well, first of all, we can bring PC economics to the game, and we can lower your total cost of ownership. So our goal there has been to produce a system which we can deliver in volume at the absolute lowest possible price with the richest, most integrated set of functions. So that anybody, whether they're going through server dispersion or server consolidation, can with confidence look at the Windows product line, know that it'll work really well with their clients, work really well with their devices, and really well with their networks. And then you take the money you've saved and start spending on delivering greater business value. And that breaks into business value in two things. Re-energizing your business systems. And the goal there is we think that VS.net and ASP.net is actually long-term going to yield the fastest evolving set of systems. Interesting review that I read recently, and I also got it reinforced at a meeting I had with our Partner Advisory Council, our Infrastructure Partner Advisory Council. I said that the real interest in .net in businesses is coming through EAI, application integration. And so when I dug into it a little further, it turned out, and I'd actually be interested in feedback from you all to see whether this is something I like to hear, so I turned the volume up. But it was that there's a lot of IT organizations who've either just through age of their applications, or they've grown through mergers and acquisitions and so on. But they essentially have sort of an untidy, somewhat aged set of business applications. But they're absolutely critical. They're running their businesses. And now they're looking and saying, well, these are expensive to run. They have overlapping reporting systems, overlapping billing systems. And we need to rationalize the things. So they're generally going out and looking at what's the right architecture for doing fairly significant line of business application re-engineering. And generally, IT organizations want to deal with standards, so they're looking at J2, multi-platform, looks like a good idea. I'll start the re-engineering process with J2. Unfortunately, a lot of that's a fairly lengthy process. It's a fairly complex technology, and the notion of re-engineering those systems based on J2 is a tough one. And they're looking at web services now and saying, you know, I can actually integrate those systems, selectively use the pieces I'd like, aggregate the pieces that are useful in the combinations that I need them, and from the locations, and applying them to the people I need to, using web services a lot quicker than that. And then at my leisure, I can decide when and if I want to re-engineer those systems. And it means the systems that were going to be sat and neglected for a while, even though they were running serious businesses, can now be brought back to life and rejuvenated with web services. So I think that it's not just a go rebuild everything with web services. It's go do systems integration with web services. And .NET will be a great player in there. And then last, this is true in Windows.NET, becomes really much stronger in Longhorn, is re-energize the knowledge worker. Give them a powerful set of tools for collaboration of all kinds, synchronous, asynchronous, shared rich workspaces. One of the things that we feel for example, on Small Business Server is that the jewel in the crown, when we've done some of the research with customers, the thing that people jump onto most quickly is they really love SharePoint. and it hasn't been something we've been featuring. But the fact that it's there in Small Business Server as a shared and easy-to-use collaboration space that works great with Office is pretty appealing to them. And of course, the real value of all of those is none of them produces a solution out of the box. Every single one of them is an opportunity, in fact, it has a requirement for value-added development, hardware, software, or integration. So last, but by no means least, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about trustworthy computing. There's just been an immense, I mean, you've been suffered from it, you've seen it, tremendous focus on the exposure to insecure systems. Interestingly, the focus has been on attacks, mass attacks, denial of services, worms, and so on. And relatively few, although there have been some, have been focused on thefts. And first of all, the thing it brings out is that if we deliver operating systems that are susceptible to attacks as delivered, and that any reasonable person deployed them and couldn't feel safe from attacks, then the obligation is entirely upon us. We can't say you should have locked down that service, or why was that turned on, or that was careless. It's absolutely incumbent on us to do two things: deliver systems that are secure out of the box. No software will ever be perfect, so that when we deliver fixes, it's absolutely also incumbent on us to deliver them to you quickly, deliver them to you in a way that they're assimilable. One of the big concerns about protection against NIMDA was if you had deployed your fixes, you didn't get attacked by NIMDA because the fixes were in place well before the virus struck. The problem was, quite reasonably, people say, well, A, I didn't know the fix was there, or B, the number of fixes that were required to be installed was pretty complex, and as a result, it's not something you do overnight. And secondly, you don't necessarily do it to 10,000 systems overnight. So, the answer that the fix was there is really not good enough. We've got to think, A, about the code being secure from the get-go. Second, getting the fixes out in such a way that they're easy to assimilate. That is, they're combined when necessary. And third, that they can be deployed practically. So as we look at Windows Update and corporate Windows Update, we need to have a mechanism whereby corporations can get notified of fixes, download them automatically, download them to their own staging server where they can then test them, and then it looks like Windows Update to the rest of their corporation. And they can set up a corporate Windows Update network that essentially looks like they've got a little piece of Microsoft Windows Update in their business, and then start to dealing with practical deployment of fixes. And that also means some changes and improvements to SMS so that it's even easier, much stronger in actually being able to recognize the levels at which the client systems, the exposed client systems are. But when you get beyond that, the long-term risk, and in fact the real damage that comes from security is not those hacks. They produce very visible damage. It's like graffiti in many ways. I'm not to say they're harmless, and it's not to say they're inexpensive and they're non-damaging to companies. But the real risk is the risk of identity theft, careless use of passwords, unsecured systems, which enable people to actually just go in and steal information, cover up their tracks behind them, and so on. So we're also doing a lot more work in the system. It starts with Windows.NET. It'll continue to make the systems much easier to deploy, and also to make sure the systems are safe and secure out of the box, so that things like that come on. Policies like password protection, password changing, and so on are very practical to deploy. We've got to make sure systems as sort of reliable and as safe and secure as you feel the telephone is. When the phone rings, you know it was for you. When you make a call, your neighbor doesn't know you made a call, and that when you pick up the phone, the dial tone is always on. So the goal of the Trustworthy Computing Initiative is to actually produce computing that feels as safe to you as any normal business activity does. It's reliable. It's there exactly when you need it. You're not intruded upon, and the thing you think things are locked away and safe are in fact kept locked away and safe. And there's a huge amount of work now going on campus on the first initiative, which is to make sure our own code is as clean as a whistle, as clean as we can possibly get it. We've trained around close to 9,000 engineers over the last month, and we're now going through the bug whacking going through all of the code. And that will take precedence over delivery of Windows.NET. So What would I love you to do? What would I really love you guys to go out and do? Well, first is, I'd like you to continue to drive wins on Windows 2000 Server. It's what you've been doing. The server goes nowhere without partners, goes nowhere without the additional services, the hardware, the integration work that you do. And as a result, we really want to make sure that we're providing you with the technology, the support, and the encouragement to go out and continue to do that. Next, it is not too early to start building web services. I think, how many of you, by the way, are already experimenting with VS.NET and ASP.NET on Windows 2000? I'd love it to be all of the hands, because I think that in the long run, that's actually going to be the most powerful change Microsoft introduces for a long time, and it's going to be very good for Microsoft. So I have a selfish view of that as well. Give us feedback. How many of you are actually evaluating Windows .NET Server in one of the various beta forms? Pretty much everybody. I'm sure it's getting to be the end of a long day, and everybody can't get their hands up. But do that. Give us the feedback. We're dying to hear. We are absolutely still open for business in terms of taking requirements in, hearing your concerns, complaints. It would like very much to hear about the things you like and things you found easy. Applications. The movement from Windows 2000 to Windows .NET Server for applications should be very smooth indeed. It shouldn't be anything like the architectural shift that was required from Windows NT to Windows 2000. But I want to make absolutely sure of that. So anything you can do to test and validate that your applications move smoothly between those two environments is incredibly valuable to us. And send in your feedback on that. We'd like you to look at Windows on 64-bit, of course. How many of you have looked at 64-bit at all? I'd like to talk maybe if you've got a minute afterwards and what the applications are, where the demand's coming from, and so on, and what the reactions are. But we would be very happy to have you exploiting the 64-bit versions of Windows Advanced Edition or Windows Enterprise Edition. And for those of you in the services business, love you to start helping your customers deploy Windows.NET. The things I think that will excite them are, again, as I said, significant improvements in ease of deployment of the systems. They are now, we've done a lot of work to make them much easier to manage, much easier to set up, much easier to deploy, and much easier to use. So we would like to see some feedback on that. Setting up for wireless networks, for example, secure wireless networks, setting up a pure PKI-based cert environment is much easier now than it ever was before. And in fact, we just did a complete wireless and PKI deployment inside Redmond. And when we had the Windows 2000 servers, and pretty much everybody's on XP clients, of course, but once we got the pairwise thing done, it was automatic versus a series of manual steps. And of course, for thousands of people, that makes an incredible amount of difference. And we'd love to see you looking at pilot opportunities for deployment of web services. So, in conclusion, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. I can't say often enough, absolute conviction in my team and the server team that the only way this product ever makes any impact on people's lives is when you add value to it. So with a very sincere request for you to take advantage of the system, give us feedback of what's good and what's bad about it, what needs to be improved, and recognize that we really value the time you've taken to be here, the time you've taken to understand the product, and the time you spend making Microsoft a better company in delivering value to its customers through you. Thank you very, very much for your time. I'll be glad to take any questions if you'd like them. Thanks. So, have any questions? Do we have time for questions? The answer is yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, the work we're doing right now in my team and across the business is some work on business justification. So there's a lot of TCO work going, but frankly, TCO again is a narrow piece of the equation. If you want to look at return on assets or return on investment, TCO only works the denominator, right? And you got to work the numerator side. So we've been doing some work. If you go on our website, you'll see some rapid economic justifications and so on. We're working with Gartner and a number of the analysts who are introducing math models for how to calculate return. And return, not just total cost of ownership, but actually, what is the cost of answering a call quicker? What is the cost of 10% change in customer satisfaction? And then mapping that to technologies. And so we're absolutely committed to that. Yeah, I put the technologies up there simply because that's what we measure. But absolutely right. The return on assets and return on investment is the thing we should be doing and will be. And let me know if you need help from us. Okay. Yes, over there. The question was, would I speak a little bit about the .NET framework on 64-bit? Yeah, I'm not sure what the date for that is, though. Do you mind if I just get your business card afterwards and drop you a mail for the date on that? You presumably just want the timing, right? Okay. Yeah, I'll just give me your card afterwards, and I'll get you a mail probably before the end of the weekend. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Similar point. Do you have any idea when Airlift is going to be available in a 64-bit edition?
No, I don't, but I doubt very much that it's going to be anytime soon. And I just don't think I see 64-bit on the desktop being a real player. And the demand is not there for even on a server version through WTS. I think the demand for 64-bit, at least to me, appears to be driven by two groups: the computationally intensive group, and actually many of those get their needs served by huge clusters and very large databases. So with the customers we've talked to, it's immense amounts of data that they're sifting through, and it's numerically intensive computing, stuff like weather forecasting, geological exploration, crash tests, simulations, things like that. But I think it'll be a long while before we see a 64-bit version of Windows. Now, that said, that's a 64-bit version that needs to be recompiled for 64-bit. I do think there are other variants of 64-bit technology that don't require new versions of the 32-bit software, and that can then run on a 64-bit machine without recompile. So now we haven't really seen any kind of market for those yet, primarily because of the very strong Intel presence, but they may pop up, and that would of course accelerate it.
What about
Exchange
Exchange?
64-bit, I think you'll see a sequel 64-bit first, and I will check with the Exchange team, but I don't think the Exchange team has a 64-bit plan this year. But I will validate that and get back to you. Again, get me your card and I'll for sure. But you will see a 64-bit version of SQL pretty soon, probably within about 90 days of Windows.NET shipment. Yes?
I saw there was a big focus on SBS. Will there be ADPs for SBS, or will it be the partners instead of MCS doing it?
I don't know what the answer to that question is. Again, I'm sorry I get so numb on that. But again, get me the card and I will answer. Just get me a card and I'll get an answer to you. Wait, did you attend the SBS session? I wonder, did you ask? It was Tracy Doherty, right, who presented?
Right. No,
Oh, okay. Hey, Tracy's around. I saw him just a few minutes ago, so I can probably get the answer for him pretty quickly. Yes. Any more? Okay, with that, I really want to thank you very much for all the time you spent here. Said the one day the sun came out in Seattle and you sat in a conference room. Shame on you. But thanks very much for the time. Have a great trip home. Bye-bye.